Hey everybody, we are going to go through a tutorial on how to find a best fit line on the TI84 calculator. Now you might have one of the newer CE models, the one with the color screen, or if you're using one of the older models, let's say the silver edition, the monochromatic screens, there are some slight differences, but we're going to go through those today. So the first thing we want to do is start by clearing out any old data. So we're going to start by pressing the Stat key, and I'm going to do this on both, so I'll just try to work simultaneously here. And then we're going to hit Edit, so that's our first option. And I already have some data in here, so I want to clear that out so we can start fresh. So in L1 and L2, the two lists that we're using, if you move the cursor up to the top of the lists where the titles are, L1 and L2, just hit Clear, Enter, and Clear, Enter, and that'll clear out the list nice and quick. I'll do that over here as well. All right, and then the next thing we are going to do is enter our data. So in these lists, I'm going to enter the data that we'll be using, and we are going to be using the following table, which I will put onto the screen so that you guys can see it. And I'll put that data set in now. So we always want to make sure that L1 is our independent or X variables list, and so I'm going to put in my X values of 3, 6, 9, 11, and 14. And then for the Y, the dependent variables, those go into list 2, L2. That's going to be 14, 15, 16, 17, and 19. And same process over here. All right, we have our data entered. Now we're going to go and press the Y equals button. So that's going to take us in here. And if we have any equations for graphing, we want to clear those out. We want this completely clean. So we want to make sure that anything in any of those is clear. Now we want to go into the stat plot menu. So that's going to be second function and then the Y equals button again. Its second function is in blue above that button on this calculator. Up here, same thing, second function, and then stat plot right above Y equals. We want to turn all plots off, and that is option 4 on the screens. So we can just press the 4 key, and that's going to put it on the screen, and then we just press enter, and we should see done. That will have turned off all the plots. And so if we go back into second function, Y equals for stat plot, we'll see all those are off. Now we are going to want to turn 1 back on, and so for option 1, plot 1, press enter. And we want the cursor to be on, press enter, and we should see the blinking cursor now on, and that turned the plot on. Now, it should default to everything that you want it to beyond that. So make sure the type is this first one here with the dots. The lists, make sure the X list is L1 and the Y list is L2. And the cursor or the mark that you want to use is the square with the hole in the middle, so it looks like a square donut. You'll notice there is a difference here. There is no color option on this particular model, so it's not going to ask for one. So there is nothing to do beyond that. But again, it should default to all this, so probably all you had to do was come in and hit the on button here. So make sure that's on. Next thing we are going to do is actually show our plotted points. So those lists, the data that we just entered into the lists, those are points. And when we press zoom, and we go to the 9th option of zoom stat, so press the number 9 or scroll the cursor down to 9, you should see points plotted that look something like that. Now there are going to be times where you might need to resize the window. We will actually need to do that in a few steps ahead. We won't do that just yet. I will show you how to do that. But for now, it should have set it up so that all the points are visible on the screen for you with the zoom stat option. Now the next thing we need to do is actually get it to show us our best fit line. The way we can do that is we use the stat button here, and we want to go over to the calc option, so use the arrow to move over to calc, and then you're going to scroll down to option 4, which is linreg, linear regression, in AX plus B. So if we press that, it's going to bring this up here. Now over here it's going to look a little different, so I'm going to press stat. I'm going to go over to calc just like I did, option 4 for linreg, AX plus B. And notice that it just puts that on the screen, linreg, and then AX plus B in a parentheses. Now that does look a little different than this. For now, this is okay. In both cases, we're pretty much done. We just need to scroll down here on this one for calculate and press enter. And then this one, we just press enter as is. And in both cases, we get the slope-intercept values for our linear regression line. And notice it's in y equals ax plus b format in both. So A represents your slope, and B represents your y-intercept if you need that information for what you're working on. Now I want this to actually show up with my plotted points, so we need to go a step further, and this is where things get a little different. So I'm going to use stat again, press the stat button. I'm going to go over to calc. I'm going to choose linreg, and then I'm going to scroll down here where it says store reg equation, reg eq, and I'm going to put in y sub 1, which is what we see up here, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to press vars. I'm going to scroll over to the right to y vars. The first option, function, is what I want, so I'll press enter. And then notice how it gives me a list of all the different function names that we see in the y equals part when we want to graph stuff. Press enter, and it'll put y1 here. It's going to store this linear regression equation in y1 in the graphing part of this calculator. So I'm going to hit enter, calculate. And then when I go up here to y equals, notice that there's my equation. It's already there for me. Now over here, it's a little different. I'm going to press stat. I'm going to go to calc, down to option 4 again, to linreg, press enter, but now I need to enter some arguments. Now, built in, or it assumes that list 1 is x values and list 2 is y values. So we don't actually have to tell it list 1 and list 2. We just need to tell it where to put this linear regression equation. And so we go to vars, just like we did on the other calculator, over to y vars, 1 for function, and then put y1, and that should show up on the screen. So you want to see it just like this. And again, this is assuming that you put your x values into list 1 and your y values into list 2. That is super important for this part because it is assuming that. When you press enter, you'll see the equation again, but when you go to y equals here, you see that it also populated there for you and it's ready to go. So at this point, we just have to hit the graph key on both, and we have now generated that best fit line. Now, if you are tasked with finding x values for a given y or y values for a given x, there are ways to do that. So we'll start off with the simpler one. If we want to figure out what y equals with a given x, we can use a function in the calculator to find that right now as is. So to get that, I'm going to go to second function, calc. The first option that pops up is value. I'll do it over here as well. Second function. The trace button has calc as its second function, so same menus. I want to use the first option, value. It's going to ask me for an x value, and let's say I want to know what y is when x equals 0. So I will put in 0, and problem. And this is where window resizing is going to come in handy. So choose quit, go to window, and you're going to want to reset the bounds of this window. So the minimum x value that we want to see, let's set that to 0. I'm just going to go ahead and set the minimum y value to 0 as well. I'll hit graph again. Notice it changes things a little bit, the way it looks at least. I'll do that over here. So x minimum, y minimum. So that's going to change the view that we get. All right, and there it is as well. And now when I go in to find that value for x equals 0, because it's now included on the plot that we see there on the screen, it will give me that answer now. So x equals 0. X equals 0, and we get a value of y being equal to 12.393443. So do consider significant figures if you're instructed to do so, unless you're instructed to put that whole value. Now, a little bit trickier is if you have a given y value and you need to find the x value that corresponds to that. There is a way to do it with the calculators. And so if, let's say, we want to know what x is when y equals 5, I'm going to go into my graphing equation options here, or I guess equations, and I'm going to put in a graph of y equals 5. Okay, and I'll hit graph, and we get a line there. Now, the point of doing this is that if we know that everywhere along these lines y equals 5, if I find where this line intersects this line, I can figure out what the x value on this line is, and that tells me what x is when y equals 5. This window doesn't show that, so we need to resize it again. And so we can change the y minimum. Let's go -30 and see if that works. And it may take a few tries. Yep, all right, we're going to have to go bigger, I think. There we go. So we had to resize the x and y bounds there to get, and now we have an intersect point on those graphs, okay? And so now we can go into second function, press the trace button to get to calc again. Instead of value, though, we are going to use the intersect option. And when we press that, it's going to say first curve on the screen. Make sure the cursor is touching one of the curves. Press enter. It'll say second curve. Make sure it's touching the other curve, which in this case, it looks like it put the cursor right on the intersect point. It's going to say guess with a question mark. That tells you to hit enter one more time. And when you see intersection on the screen, it tells you, well, for a y value of 5 on that line, x is equal to negative 16.7037. So that's an easy way with your calculator to find x values for a given y. And you could use algebra with the slope-intercept equation form of the linear regression equation. But hey, if you already got it on the calculator, you might as well use that. And now if you were going to go in and find other x values for other given y's, all you would need to do is go into the y equals option here to change that graph from y equals 5 to say y equals 3 or y equals 2. Whatever y value you're given, you can just plug it in there and then repeat the same process we just did. All right, I hope that helps. If you have any further questions, be sure to ask about that. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.